Hey, all my cell group people out there, huh? Psalm 50, right? We talk about Psalm 50 all the time. The sacrifice, think about it. I talk about this many times. The sacrifice, God says, the sacrifice I desire from you is thanksgiving. A sacrifice, by default, means it's a sacrifice because most people don't do it. So by nature, a sacrifice is something that most people don't do, and that's why it's called a sacrifice. So in essence, God is saying, most people do not give thanksgiving, and so I call it a sacrifice because only 1% of people do it. All right? So when you give thanksgiving, it's almost like, I would think it's more important than money to God. And it's like an intangible tithing and offering. Like when you, in the fire books, it says when you pray and your prayers are collected in a golden bowl and taken up to heaven, I think our thanksgiving is the same thing. So I think, and there's a hint there because I think God takes thanksgiving and complaining very seriously, because the time that Israel's blessing was denied because of their complaining. So that just shows you how they did not make it to the promised land because they complained. Think about this. So the complete opposite would be, how important is Thanksgiving then if God will deny a blessing due to your complaining, right? So something to think about. Okay, so I tried not to talk about what I'm going to talk about today in cell group, but too bad, cell group people. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I just get excited and then I have to talk about it. So they're going to hear it again, but, there's always a different angle. I was talking to them last night about for me personally, I'm working now, right? And would I rather not work? Of course, right? But I was telling them that I would much rather be in this situation right now because I see what God is doing inside to my character and how I interact with people and how I view life, that I'd much rather be in this situation than be my old self, but not working. You see what I mean? And I think we have to get to a point where we value the intangible things in life. And that's only going to come through your gratitude. Because if you're so focused on the tangible things in life, then you're always looking for something that's going to fill your belly, and you're always going to get hungry again. But when you can focus on the intangible things, like having a conversation with somebody and not trying to leave that conversation early because you're in such a hurry, maybe you might enjoy life how it's supposed to be enjoyed. I think us Americans especially with this whole AI culture coming, and it's really sad. People don't know how to socialize with others. And this is true. People don't know how to socialize, especially, our youth. They know how to talk a lot better to people, but, you go find a random 18-year-old out there, they don't know how to talk to nobody. That's sad. It's really sad, actually. And I think we have to get to that point where we I was telling our group last night, why is it that old people are always so slow? Why, like an 85-year-old, why are they so slow? Why is it that when you talk to somebody that's really old, they're very invested in the conversation? You ever notice that? They're very invested in the conversation. You can tell they're just so much gratitude when they're just having a simple conversation. They just enjoy it. They just enjoy the fellowship. And I wonder, maybe we're missing something, Maybe we need to slow down. Maybe we need to enjoy the intangible things in life. And why is it that God is having us go in a slower direction when the world is going at the speed of light. AI, right? These automated cars, like everything. But yet God is like, no, go read a book. No, go in person to things. No, go talk to somebody, right? Slow down. Go out and fellowship with your friends, right? Not go into a VR lounge with, 5,000 random strangers you don't know, and you're just sitting on your bed and doing nothing, right? What's that going to do for your life? It's not going to do anything. And so I think, and I was telling our group last night that I think our relationship, well, we all know that our relationship with our spouse is reflective of our relationship with God, right? That's easy. We all know that. But I remember a pastor told me years ago that what about the relationship with people, your brothers and sisters in this church, is reflective of your relationship with God. If you have a grudge against somebody in this church, here, in this ministry, and you feel like the world is against you or the church is against you, I mean, don't you see something a little wrong there? That's off, right? Right, let's say, oh, well, I'm cool with my pastors, but, this person really gets on my nerves. I don't like that person. Why is it that if God made us to be peacemakers, why are we having conflicts with our brothers and sisters in the church? That should be a red flag for yourself. You should think, why can I get along with God's people, especially as a leader? If you can't get along with everybody in here, yes, people are stubborn. Yes, people can be very annoying. Yes, all the above. But it doesn't matter. You as a leader especially have to learn to adapt to everybody. And if you can't, then I believe that shows your lack of relationship with God, because God and Jesus can fellowship with anybody, regardless of their stubborn nature, regardless of their flaws. And so if we can't, like the Bible says, I was talking about this last night, if we can't love God's people and God is in that person, then how can we say we love God, right? I don't know if that's in Hebrews, it's somewhere in there, right? And then we were also talking about if somebody goes around boasting that they know God, there's a verse, right? If somebody goes around boasting that they know God, but yet they don't live it in action, then that person is a liar and God's love is not in them, right? We know this verse. And so I think you should embrace your process of your breaking, not because of where God's gonna take you, but in a physical sense, but like in the intangible sense. What about your personality and your character that God wants to bring out of you to touch people? That is far more valuable than a car, or far more valuable than a house, or some clothes or shoes. What about your character being changed where now you can talk to anybody? And even on top of that, not only can you talk to anybody, but you enjoy the conversation. Everybody knows the feeling in here let me frame it this way. Everybody knows the feeling when you are invested in a conversation, but the other person is not, right? And I'm not talking about like your spouse, and they might be on their phone. I'm talking like legit somebody that just doesn't want to talk to you. And you can tell that they're just like, yeah, and they're constantly looking away. And who wants to have that conversation, right? That's not fun for the person that's invested in the conversation. How can we fellowship with God's people if we don't know how to have a conversation with somebody? If we don't know how to actually enjoy the intangible things in life? How can we love God's people if it's a burden to have a conversation with God's people? You see where I'm going with this? If that is a problem for you, you have a problem in your relationship with God, because you are called to connect with other people so that they can be saved. And if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with God. Do you see this? That's a huge issue. And that's reflective of your spousal relationship. That's reflective of your relationship with others. We should all be at peace with each other. It doesn't mean that everybody's flaws are just going to go away, but you have to learn how to handle them. Otherwise, how can we love God if we can't love his people? You see this? So we were kind of talking about that last night, And so, yeah, Psalm, like she said, Psalm 50 about Thanksgiving, that's very, very important to me too. And I think if we can't live in gratitude and thanksgiving, then you're not going to go anywhere in your life, because God's not going to bless you with more if you're complaining over the little small thing you already have, right? I was telling Tylen today, because he got his car. Yes, Mustang, yeah. I was telling Tylen today, because he was like, I can't believe that I got a Mustang for my first car. I was like, yeah, man, you're blessed, I was like, but the way you show your gratitude to God is by, you live your life now by making the right choices, right? And that's the gratitude, And you have to train yourself, For me, when I pray, I try to pray at least twice a day. And I split up my prayer, because I think of it like this. If I'm spending, let's say I was dating or something. Obviously I'm married, but I'm just giving you an example that you can understand. If you like somebody, you want to spend time with that person all day, right? You're not just going to see them for 1 hour in the morning and be like, oh, see you tomorrow, right? You're going to want to see them when you get off work, right? Or if you have friends, you don't want to see them for 30 minutes and then that's it. You want to spend time with them, right? And so I think it applies to God like that too. If, this is how, for me, what works for me. If I just talk to God in the morning and that's it, there's so much other stuff that goes on along the day that I'm going to, I could, in a sense, forget about God. You see what I mean? So for me, I like to, go see God again. So, I'm not praying, heck hours, but, I split it up so that my mind is always on God. You see what I mean? And that gives me more peace. So I'll wake up and pray, and then when I drive, because I'm constantly going to all these schools, and on my last appointment, when I have to come home, I pray in the car, and then when I get home, then I pray again. And I've noticed that this really works for me, because you're constantly spending time with God, not just once, but multiple times a day. And when you spend time with somebody, whether that's a people that are of good influence or people that are of bad influence, that is going to rub off on you, right? If you hang out with people that are smokers and drinkers, well, what do you think is going to happen? You see that? If you hang out with people that are always kind and, don't party and that, have good sense, that's going to rub off on you, because your conscience is going to be bothered when you do the wrong thing, but yet the rest of your group is doing good things, right? And so I believe when I think to myself, if I spend time with God multiple times in a day, then that's going to rub off on me naturally. And I'll naturally interact with people better. And I see it happening. And it's causing me to enjoy life more, even if I have my negative days, because now the things that are free and intangible, I enjoy them. You see that? And now life becomes more sweet in a sense. So something to think about. I just quickly want to talk about John. So we all know the story about Jesus getting crucified, and Pilate. We all know who Pilate is, right? Pilate, the Roman governor who made the final decision for Jesus to be crucified. And so in the footnote in the TPT, it was something really good came up. So I want to share it with you guys. So is it verse 1 on that one? Let me see. Yeah. Okay, let me just read. Then Pilate ordered Jesus to be brutally beaten with a whip of leather straps embedded with metal. So, as the Passion of the Christ had that's very accurate, right? It's in the Bible. And the soldiers also wove thorn branches into a crown and set it on his head and placed a purple robe over his shoulders. Then one by one, they came in front of him to mock him by saying, "Hail to the King of the Jews." And one after another, they repeatedly punched him in the face. Once more, Pilate went out and said to the Jewish officials, "I will bring him out once more so that you know that I found nothing wrong with him." So the Jewish leaders are jealous of Jesus because they want Jesus to deliver them in a physical way from Rome. But Jesus came to deliver them spiritually. And because of this, they're blind because they have their own will. And so they are now upset that Jesus is preaching a message that doesn't align with what they think the Messiah should be. And so they want to crucify him because he's doing miracles, even though they think it's against what the Bible's talking about, but they're blind. So they bring him to Pilate because they don't have the authority to crucify somebody. Only the Roman government does because they're in charge. Right, you have Caesar, you have the governors, Pilate, and then you have Jewish leaders, and then you have the common people, right? And so this is what's happening, right? So they bring them to Pilate, and if you go to John 18, verse 39, and let's read the footnote. So, right, we don't know much about Pilate, but I'm going to tell you about Pilate so that you know who he is. And, I was talking about Hitler last night, and then Pastor was talking about Hitler today. So I want to talk about it again. So Pilate was like the modern day Hitler of that time. It says, just that footnote right there. Yeah, the little bubble. Pilate was not a saint. He was considered to be a corrupt and violent leader who would execute people without trial. He stole money from the temple treasury and brought pagan statues into Jerusalem, which caused riots and death to many. All right, I'll get to that last part later. Okay, so Pilate does not give people a trial. He just executes people on demand, okay? He's not a good leader. He's a tyrant, right? And so they bring Jesus, but all of a sudden, Pilate is convicted. You see this? Pilate is convicted. He knows that Jesus is a holy man. And we also know this because, let's go to Matthew 27, verse 18. Now Pilate was fully aware that the religious leaders had handed Jesus over to them because of their jealousy. Just then, as Pilate was presiding over the tribunal, or, the session, his wife sent an urgent message to him. If this couldn't get any more clear for Pilate, don't harm that holy man, for I suffered a horrible nightmare last night about him. Right? This could be like your wife coming to you telling you, I don't think you should do this. Right? So we have a twofold thing. Pilate is known to just execute people on the spot. So why didn't he just execute Jesus on the spot then? Because there was something in his conscience that he is bothered about. And this could be like us. We have a bad track record, like I was talking about last night. We could have a really bad track record with God, making all the wrong choices. But then God, at the last minute, could come to you and still give you one last chance out of his mercy, even though you don't deserve it, so that you could never say that God did not give you a chance. And so this is like Pilate. Terrible track record, but God comes to him at the very end with a decision that will cost him everything. But if he makes the right decision, he could possibly be saved. Pilate himself, right? And we'll see this. So he has clues that he should not execute Jesus, right? The cross is going to get fulfilled either way. God can use Caesar himself to execute Jesus if he wanted to and have the cross still be fulfilled, right? It doesn't have to be Pilate. So he gets a clue from his wife, okay? This could be like we're getting obvious clues from pastors, from your spouse. Hey, I don't I don't think you should go in this direction. I don't think you should go in this direction, right? Okay, now let's go back to John 19. So he's already feeling convicted, and his wife, or the other voice is coming to him like, don't do this. That could be like your authority, right? Despite your track record, you know that you should not cross that final line. Otherwise, that could be your last chance. So Pilate's like, I will bring Jesus out once more so that you know I found nothing wrong with him. So when Jesus emerged bleeding, wearing the purple robe and crown of thorns on his head, Pilate said to them, look at him. Here is your man. I believe it was like Pilate's almost saying like, look at him, guys. Look what you're doing to this guy, right? No sooner did the high priest and the temple guards see Jesus, they all shouted in a frenzy, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate replied, you take him then and nail him to a cross yourself. I told you, he's not guilty. I find no reason to condemn him. This is somebody who executes people without trial, trying to free Jesus. You see this? So he is being convicted. There, he knows something's not right. And his wife already told him, I had a dream about this guy last night. I don't think don't harm him, right? Then the Jewish leaders shouted back, but we have the law, and according to our law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. Then Pilate was greatly alarmed, and it says in the TPT that his soul dropped. So like he knows when he heard that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. So he took Jesus back inside and said to him, where have you come from? But once again, silence filled the room. Perplexed, Pilate said, are you going to play death? Don't you know that I have the power to grant you your freedom or nail you to a tree? Jesus answered, you would have no power over me unless it was given to you from above. This is why the one who betrayed me is guilty of an even greater sin. From then on, Pilate tried to find a way out of the situation and set him free. This is somebody who executes people on the spot and wants to set Jesus free, okay? He knows that he should not be crossing that line. But the Jewish authorities shouted him down. Key verse. If you let this man go, you're no friend of Caesar. Anyone who declares himself a king is an enemy of the emperor. Okay, this statement here is blackmail from the Pharisees. Okay, let me explain. So I need that whole footnote. That's the most important part of this whole thing. Yeah, that one. In essence, these words were a form of blackmail as the Jewish authorities were reminding Pilate that it would ruin his career if he pardoned Jesus. The term friend of Caesar was an honorific title given only to the ruling wealthy class of Romans who would have access to the emperor's court. If you have to zoom out on Google Chrome, then you can, because I need the whole thing. You know what I mean? The three bubbles in the top right? Yeah, and then just zoom out. There you go. There we go. I got it right here. The term friend of Caesar was an honorific title given only to the ruling wealthy class of Romans who would have access to the emperor's court. Many of these friends of Caesar, right? Caesar is the head honcho, were senators and members of the equestrian order, also known as the knights. Pilate's position was a political appointment due to his being a member of this elite class of Romans who took an oath of loyalty to Caesar, right? Caesar is number one. Pilate is the next in line, and he basically has access to all of Caesar's resources, and he eats at his table, okay? They are like the highest, wealthiest class in the nation, and they have all the access to everything. They have no restraints. And, okay, let's continue. The Jewish leaders, Pharisees, were in effect threatening to inform Caesar or Rome that Pilate was allowing treason in Caesar's empire. They're basically saying, if you let Jesus go, we're going to go to Caesar directly and we're going to tell him that you betrayed him. What do you think Pilate is thinking? Pilate is now faced with the choice of, do I let Jesus go or do I literally lose my entire career? Everything that I have, all my resources, possibly be executed by Caesar, lose my house, probably my wife, everything, and become a common person, right? This is the kind of choice that somebody has to make when they are faced with a terrible track record, but God will still give that person a last chance so that they cannot say, that God did not give them a chance. But God, out of his mercy, will still give a chance like this, but he wants to see if you're really about it. Because this was going to cost him everything. All right, he actually might be executed. But what if he set Jesus free and the cross would still get fulfilled? Maybe Caesar himself comes down and sentences Jesus to go be crucified. The cross is still fulfilled. But Pilate, now, what if his ministry now is to go to Rome? What kind of testimony would that have been, right? But obviously it didn't work out, so now Paul is there to go to Rome. You see this? So I think that we have to be careful when we've used up all our chances, and we can't think, why is it so hard? Well, you have to think that your final decision God is asking from you is hard because of your track record. You made it hard on yourself. And if you really mean it, then you're willing to give up everything. The Bible says it will cost you everything, and you should count the cost and consider the cost, you know. One false move and his appointment would be canceled and his entire career finished. What are you so afraid to put over, or what are you so afraid to give up, right? People are so concerned about their callings and about their careers and what they want to do for God that they forget that it's not about what they do for God. It's about what God does through you. Like I talk about many times, it's not, God called Moses not for Moses. God called Moses for the sake of Israel. Moses is there as a vessel to save God's people. God is working through Moses to save his people. It's not so Moses can be blessed. Moses is the benefactor. He's the side benefit, right? It's not about Moses. It's about God's people. Whatever God has anointed you to do in this ministry, do not become big-headed and think, oh, look at my career and look at my ministry that I have now. You're only going to be deceiving yourself and you're going to get corrupted and fall. Your ministry is for the purpose of saving souls. If you don't get this right, God cannot take you to a higher level because you're going to get corrupted, right? So you have to know that God works through you. You don't have the power to do anything great for God. God is the great one that does stuff through you. Okay? And if you're somebody that has made a lot of dumb mistakes, know that it will cost you everything. Okay? This is a spiritual representation of what it could cost you. But if you really mean it, don't go around talking and say, oh, I love God, I know God. Well, God's going to be like, okay, then make this kind of choice. And if you can't, then you have to ask yourself if you're really living for God. So, and there's evidence here that obviously Pilate betrayed Jesus, because if he had a chance to free him, but he didn't, then that by default is betrayal. Do we agree on this? Okay, so Judas betrayed Jesus. What was his fate? Somebody over here, because they already know. What was Judas's fate? What happened to him? Right, he committed suicide. What do we think happened to Pilate? That's right. Okay, so let's go to John 18:39 and read the last of the footnote. It was reported that, okay, so Pilate was afraid to give up everything in order to take Jesus' side, even though he knew that was right. Okay? And because of that, the very thing that he chose over God was the very thing that made him fall. And this is so God, because God does that. The very thing that you choose to put over God is the thing that makes you stumble later. And so, because he put the people and his reputation over God, they later exiled him to an island. Okay, the people exiled him from his position to an island where he committed suicide. Okay? So, my point in all this is that if you're so adamant in putting your desires or what, your career or something over God, you have to know that if you continue in that path, you're going to lose that and you're going to have to start over anyways. When you could have just voluntarily laid it down, like Jesus says, I lay my life down and I pick it up again voluntarily, right? So we have to live in that manner instead of being forced to, and then everything's going to crumble into ashes, right? So, just some little tidbits of information that I want you guys to chew on, right? We talked about, the intangible things in life that we need to value instead of always these tangible things. And you'll enjoy life more. How fellowshipping with God's people, getting along with God's people could be a reflection of your relationship with God. If you're always butting heads with people, what does that say about your relationship with God? And then lastly, your choice. If you've constantly chosen wrong, God's going to put you in a situation where you have to make a hard choice. And if you're going around talking that, oh yeah, I love God, you're always boasting about your relationship with God, God will test you on this. But if you're unwilling to make that choice because you want to put your career or your other desire or your will above God's will, that very thing is going to be the thing that stumbles you, as the Bible shows us here. So that's all I got. Chew on it and think about it. Amen.